Now joining us in studio is KF Malindi, a junior political analyst, and Simba Mochero, ZIPP youth spokesperson. And joining us over the phone line, we have Martha Mamombe, Afro Worldview Zimbabwe correspondent. A very warm welcome to you, gentlemen, and thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having us.
Now, I want to start with you, since you're our political analyst this evening. I just want to find out what is your stance on what has been currently taking place in Zimbabwe?
I think it's a very difficult situation to comprehend. Why? Because post-election was extremely peaceful. Leading up to the run-up to the election, I mean, everything seemed to be moving smoothly. The environment was perfect. It was conducive for a pretty free and fair election. So many monitors and observation teams had come into the country, and things seemed to be moving well. Even post-election, I mean, Tuesday, things were still looking quite peaceful, although social media had started to blow up with a number of radical machinations from certain individuals. I think, but the most important thing with yesterday's events is that a number of people are to blame for what happened yesterday. First and foremost, security services were extreme and excessive in their response to the demonstrators. That cannot be taken away from their liability, and accountability cannot be taken away. They're responsible for that. There's no way that trained individuals, security individuals, would need to resort to killing people. However, we also need to look at the MDC Alliance, whose statements over social media and press conferences led to people, sort of incited people. And they have that influence over their supporters. That is unnecessary. The people of Zimbabwe themselves, who decided to go onto the streets and set cars alight and cause commotion and chaos, they're also, I mean, definitely they need to be reprimanded for what they did. So it's a number of people, it's a number of institutions and individuals who need to be reprimanded in regards to what happened yesterday. No blame cannot be placed on one specific individual. We need to collectively, as a people, take onus and say, we are responsible for the peace within our country. There are certain things that we need to avoid in order for us to maintain peace.
But now looking at the electoral process and looking at how ZEC has approached the situation, where they have come out giving us results so slowly, because people were expecting that the presidential results would have been announced already. They were looking at yesterday, but now we're looking at today and they're saying soon. So looking at that situation, can't we say that ZEC in this whole situation caused more chaos?
Well, okay, no, we definitely cannot say ZEC caused more chaos. So if the opposition party or the ruling party decide that ZEC is not going according to its proper mandate, or the processes are too slow, there are processes and protocols in which they can submit their issues. Formal written statements to ZEC themselves, legal devices that they could use to support themselves. However, let's not forget that the constitutional mandate of ZEC gives them 5 days after the election, which means that we cannot use the word ZEC is withholding results. We can say they're delaying, they're slow, which means their process isn't up to scratch. We can only use the word withhold after Saturday, because constitutionally their mandate says they have to announce results by Saturday. So indeed, maybe, yes, results have been slow, have been trickling in rather slowly. And of course, the Zimbabweans are allowed to be skeptical, because in 2008, it took a whole month for the presidential election results to be announced. So of course, that skepticism can be there, but the manner in which they need to approach ZEC and castigate them for whatever delays are there needs to be professional and needs to be by the book and by the law. There is due process that they can take, as opposed to going to social media and inciting people who are easily influenceable.
Simba, I want to bring you into this conversation. We heard the Zimbabwe police spokesperson refuting claims that people were told to leave Harare. With what we saw transpire yesterday, what are your thoughts on her claims?
No, I'm sure she just issued a statement just for the sake of issuing a statement. But according to people who were actually there, they actually say they were told to leave. They were actually forced to leave and to displace. That's how all the raffles started, and we ended up with people being killed.
Now, I do want to cross over to our reporter, Martha Mamombe, our Zimbabwe correspondent. Martha, thank you so much for joining us. At this point, can you just give us the latest details? Because we know that we were expecting the presidential results to be announced around 10, but it seems as if at this point we can't really say 10.
Okay, good evening. Now, police have announced earlier on this evening that 26 people have so far been arrested in connection with yesterday's fatal demonstration. It is safe to say that part of the reason why the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission is maybe pushing back the initial announcement of the presidential results has to do with the fact that Harare still does remain to some extent hostile, as the army and police are heavily armed and on the streets of Harare. I'm told that even as late as 3 in the morning, there were still police and soldiers on the streets making sure that no one was protesting and that there were no gatherings. So any group of people, 5 going upwards, were seen walking together, even if they were not armed, were being stopped and asked questions by the army. Now, this is interesting because yesterday's events just unfolded so quickly and so excessively that it has caused a lot of strain on both sides of the aisle.
And now, Martha, at this point, what more details do you know around arrests that have been made in Harare so far?
We know so far that among those arrested was Shadrach Mashayamobe, who was actually in the ZANU-PF party until he got kicked out. He has since joined the MDC alliance. Tendai Bitu, who recently won the parliamentary seat for Harare East, was also apprehended by police. But the police spokesperson did indicate that he was no longer on top of the suspects list and that they were going to continue with their investigations. They were going to launch a probe into getting to know how this event unfolded and how it became so excessive and so violent and claiming the lives of 6 people in just a short period of time.
Now, you're saying that 6 people have passed on due to the violence that occurred in Harare. Do we know any more details around those 6 people who lost their lives?
Nothing yet is known about those who have passed away, but we do know that the NDC Alliance presidential candidate Nelson Chamisa did visit some of those who were injured in yesterday's clashes with the army as well as the police. Now, his spokesperson did come out this afternoon saying that the MDC Alliance does not condone violence of any form and that they have informed all organs of their party to desist from any form of violence and disrupting the smooth movement of the electoral process. It's interesting because ZANU-PF has taken a stand blaming the opposition MDC Alliance of being solely responsible for yesterday's events unfolding. And it's also interesting that the army has been completely quiet, has not issued a statement as far as the use of tear gas, gunfire on unarmed civilians. And it's interesting because people have been condemning this on Twitter, on social media. Zimbabweans have been calling out the army, saying that they took it too far, they overreacted, especially because these people were not armed. It's only until after the army started to patrol the streets that they began to torch and burn buildings and torch cars. But we'll see where this investigation will go and who will be to blame at the end of the day.
And looking at the clashes that took place yesterday, it seems as if it was very violent. We know that around 3 a.m. it was still a bit tense in that area. Looking at today, how did things transpire on the streets? How are Zimbabweans today?
Today, most retail shops remained closed, as many feared that the unrest would continue. There was heavy police and army presence, of course, on the streets. I think they were expecting another episode of yesterday's events. And, you know, I was going over Twitter this afternoon, and one Zimbabwean said that you could get killed for just protesting and being an opposition supporter in Zimbabwe, and you can go and rape someone and only get 5 years in jail. It's interesting how people have begun to interpret yesterday's events and bring it home and give social sort of connotations to it.
All right. Thank you so much, Martha, for that update. And I'm sure we will be crossing back later to you to get the latest if the presidential results will be coming out anytime soon. I want to cross back into studio. Malindi, so far, with the political crisis that has taken place in Zimbabwe, it seems as though this crisis keeps rising because today a lot of us expected that it would be calm because the presidential elections would come out and things would be better than yesterday. But looking at how things have gone so far, what interventions should we be seeing taking place with what is currently happening?
Interventions are the last thing I think Zimbabweans want to see, and they made that very clear in November. Zimbabweans are ready to deal with their nation's problems by themselves. And the biggest way in which they were expecting to deal with the issues that the country has been going through for the past 20 years was the vote on Monday. Failing to respect the due process of the vote and everything that comes after it is what would then undermine all the efforts that the people of Zimbabwe have made. I think from a political standpoint, it is very disappointing coming from both sides of the aisle how they've dealt with what happened yesterday. Because the first thing they did was start to apportion blame to each other. They only started giving condolences to the bereaved today and probably going to visit people within hospitals or see the deceased or see the families. And it takes away from the spirit of hope that the nation had to assume that maybe these politicians actually care for the aspirations of the people. And I think that is the biggest thing that I took away from yesterday, which is why I clearly stated that to apportion blame, definitely the security services were not meant to use excessive force. However, as a nation, we could all play a part in trying to avoid violence, especially after the election. Let the process be complete. Let's wait until Saturday. We have our V11 forms. We have our observer missions in the country. Let's let the process go through. Let's find out what the result is. If there are objections, then we take the legal routes in the due process in order to solve the problems.
And so far, we just have the preliminary results, and we're still waiting for the presidential election results. But now, what scenarios should we expect from this, looking at now you're saying that we should wait for Saturday?
You see, that's another thing. I think ZEC is very afraid to make any mistakes, and they should be, because any mistake that ZEC is to make at this point in time would discredit them, and they're already not the most legitimate organization. They haven't gained the trust of the people. But people don't understand that. So, of course, everyone has had a V11 form. So all political parties, their polling agents were able to collect V11 forms. So were the observer missions and other institutions like ZESNI. But then you can't use those alone and assume that you're going to use that to then declare the end of the vote, because what ZEC has to then do is they have to verify. Their verification processes are much larger than that. They have to go through the ballots that were issued compared to the ballots that were actually used. So all of that counting and that process has to go through. So yes, there might be a delay, as in any election, but let's wait until Saturday before we start throwing out these machinations and insinuating a stolen election or a rigged election.
Simba, what are your thoughts in terms of the delay, the slow process that people are crying out for?
Well, looking at from the people's point of view, they have become skeptical because of discrepancies. If we look at the number of people that voted in the last election in certain constituencies, this election it has doubled, and it has caused people to believe that they were rigged. Like there's a constituency which had 12,000 people in the previous election, but all of a sudden this election is giving 20,000 and above number of people, which is in a space of five years is really, and it's not corresponding.
But looking at how the situation is in Zimbabwe, are people really patient enough to actually wait for these results?
Well, that's another problem we're having with our people as well on their side. They are not giving ZEC enough time. They are more like putting pressure on ZEC. I think ZEC is as he said, that they are trying to avoid mistakes. So let ZEC take their time, but let people be updated, if I may say. And the another thing is that social media is going way ahead of ZEC. people are in a rush to announce their own imaginative results, which is causing people to believe that maybe they were really rigged. But in this situation with observers, with all the fairness that has been preached about, it's not easy for the election to be rigged per se, but let us not follow social media. Actually, social media is the one that has given birth to such chaos right now.
And I know that you represent the youth in Zimbabwe. So far, what has the youth been saying on the ground?
Yes, we still go back to social media. The youths have been given this wrong picture about the results, and of course they are eager for a change. We cannot take that away from them. Every youth in Zimbabwe is eager for change. They need jobs, they need whatever they need. So given such accusations on social media being preached that we are losing because of rigging and what, it's making them anxious, it's making them angry. That's why you saw yesterday they took to the street. If you look, the majority of the numbers of people, it was the youths.
To add on to Simba's point, sorry.
Let's hear.
Social political tolerance is what we need in the country right now. Because the minute there's so many abuses being thrown around on social media because of people's own political affiliations and political views, our country is not going to progress. That is not the democracy we're talking about. If you're an MDC Alliance supporter, you're allowed to be an MDC Alliance supporter. If I want to critique you, I will critique you in a professional manner. Same as Anupiaf supporter, but for us to start slinging mud at each other and cussing each other out, I think that is one thing that we definitely need to avoid. We need social political tolerance, and that is also the best way to avoid violence escalating. Because it's all really, he's right, Simba's right. It's all really started on social media. Everything is breaking out on social media.
And still on that point of social media, we know that a lot of people had questioned what Chamisa had said on social media, and most people had said that it was actually him who caused the chaos that took place in Harare. A lot of people at the moment are questioning the maturity of Chamisa, and a lot of people have also been saying that are young people able to lead the country? Looking at some of those issues that people have questioned, what is your take on that?
As a young person myself, I would never say that another young person isn't able to lead or lacks the maturity. I think we do need to surround ourselves with people who are a bit more experienced, which I think he has done, in all honesty. I think he is credible candidate for the presidency of the country. Maybe not the best, but he is a credible candidate. I won't take that away from him. His remarks, however, were rather scanty and they were premature. As a presidential candidate, not just an ordinary parliamentary candidate, not to take away from members of parliament, but as a presidential candidate, I think he needs to think it through and, like I said, follow due process. If he had any issues with the way things were being run, he was supposed to follow the right protocols of doing so and not go on social media, especially knowing what Zimbabweans have been through and how volatile the situation is.
Yes, true. Gentlemen, thank you so much for coming in studio and having this discussion with me.
Thank you very much.
And that was KF Malindi, a junior political analyst, and we had Simba Muchero, ZIPP youth spokesperson, as we're just talking about the progress so far in Zimbabwe. We know that the Zimbabwe Election Commission appealed for patience over the presidential vote count, which we are expecting around 10 this evening after the opposition protests over alleged fraud turned violent when soldiers opened fire. And ZEC commissioner has stated that ZEC implores the public to be patient as they collate the final results, and the results are set to be announced as soon as possible. Right now, Africa Tonight will take a short break. We'll be back with more news and updates. Stay tuned.